Hi, thank you for everybody for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about reference checking and assessment testing to avoid hiring problem generators. The topic, overall in this session for Bright Talk is being more efficient in the workplace. So we felt this topic about avoiding problem generators was going to be helpful for folks, since these individuals can be disruptive to our workflow and getting things done. So just a little bit about who we are and who I am. I'm the CEO of a company called The Hire Talent. We're a talent assessment company. So we provide pre-hire assessment testing tools to screen candidates for attitude and integrity problems, emotional competencies, things like motivations, work ethic, drive, for positions. So these can be things like your core personality and behavioral quadrants. So looking for potential to be successful in a role. We also look from an ability standpoint at things like emotional intelligence. So the ability to understand how your internal emotional state will affect your performance as well as others, and using that information to move move people towards action. Additionally, we measure a lot of abilities revolving around communication skills, sales abilities, both basic and advanced, and cognitive thinking skills. So logic, critical thinking, core IQ. So all of these factors combined often allow us to be highly predictive in choosing the right people. The second part of what we do is we also offer a lot of executive retained searches. So we really partner with our clients to help them select the best person possible. Where that qualifies us and myself personally, I interview about 1,000 people a year, in addition to assessing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of additional folks for our clients. So these topics about preventing problem generator hires from entering our organizations is one that's near and dear to my heart. And these two techniques of using assessment tools and good reference checking tend to be a very powerful way of preventing these hires from entering our organizations. So why is this even important? Problem generators demonstrate behaviors such as being argumentative, defensive, passive-aggressive, unreliable. They lack general personal responsibility. They tell half-truths. They lie. Sometimes they can be pathological liars. They often are yes people, so that might be surprising to some. They're combative. They're gossipers, amongst many other types of negative behaviors. As we can all imagine, all of these negative behaviors can infect teams. They can affect positive contributors, maybe make them lean more towards the negative side of things. They can create massive headaches for managers and coworkers. So by creating excuses, wasting time with dealing with unnecessary issues related to these behavioral issues, spreading of negativity. And in this day and age, they can be very difficult to fire. They can threaten to sue, or we see this a lot in lower level positions. They tend to be more prone to filing workman's comp issues, related issues that could be potentially frivolous. So all of these things distract us from our core business activities, whatever they may be, selling or manufacturing or creating a product or service. So it's really important to us to make sure we eliminate these people from entering our organizations to begin with. So one of the things here is, and why we talk about this is, many of us probably have had this happen and have found that the worst of these offenders can be very difficult to detect. they're very skilled at first impressions. They tend to be very charismatic, and oftentimes they are that way because they will say or do anything to look good. They use deceit and half truths to get ahead. That's how they accomplish things. So using the tools like a pre-hire assessment, one that's specifically geared towards measuring attitude and integrity, can be very helpful in seeing through the minutia, if we call it that, and also using powerful reference checking techniques can also be very, very effective in eliminating these things. So other factors that come up here in terms of why this is so important, threat to company integrity. We see this a lot in sales and even in support type roles, but folks who have attitude and integrity issues, they often cut corners. They shirk some of their core work responsibilities. They omit facts with clients. They maybe also step outside of company best practices. Maybe offer things to clients that are out of the box that eventually may come back to bite an organization, especially as a relationship continues with a potential client. So the short-term effects often go unseen, but the long-term effects show up over time and can be very disruptive. These folks decrease productivity and are disruptive to the team because they create an emotional toll on all employees. Managers stay up at night trying to figure out what to do with the problem generator. Other employees become disengaged or disenfranchised because of a problem generator, causing them disruption in their own work or their own interactions. And so the focus gets shifted away from our core responsibilities. So in terms of reference checking, I always like to tell folks this. If I only had one interview question to ask every candidate in a perfect world, I would simply ask one question of every single candidate, and that is a reference question. And we'll take a hypothetical person. We've got an individual who has 3 jobs over the last 15 years, 5 years in each job. And if I go through their work history, the number one thing I want to know is who was their direct supervisor? What was their name? What was their title? How do you spell that person's name? And once I've asked these series of questions, then the punchline comes in. Would this person give you a reference, yes or no? And I do not accept any sort of in-between answer. We really need the person, should ideally have an immediate yes response to that. Really, any other response to that question begins to raise red flags. Ultimately, once that person has agreed that yes, that past direct supervisor who's been named and the context of their how they supervise this person has been established, then I can ask, what should I expect your previous supervisor to say about your performance? How would they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 overall? And what would they say to me that you could have done to get to the next level? If you were rated an 8, what would you need to do to have achieved a 9 overall rating? This in effect acts as a truth serum, because I've established that I'm very serious about speaking to this reference. You've agreed that this person would speak to me as a reference. And then I've asked them from the candidate's perspective what this other person is going to say about them. That person has to be very careful and about presenting an objective an analysis about their own performance from somebody else's perspective, because we're going to go and talk to them. And if those two perspectives don't align very well, then obviously that's going to be problematic, and that's going to indicate some sort of issue, whether it be an attitude integrity, a behavioral issue, or a performance-based issue. So many people are immediately going to jump to, well, our company has a policy that we're only going to verify dates of employment and whether this person's eligible for rehire. So many companies these days are afraid of the litigious factors of providing in-depth references. And they're right. They should not provide references for folks that have underperformed or been disruptive, because they are liable for potentially saying and doing something that could prevent that person from getting a job, or at least open themselves up to that degree of liability. But flip that around. Think about somebody that you've worked for, who's worked for you, or maybe that you've worked for and you've done an excellent job for, and think about that scenario. In those types of situations, when you have had an employee who's worked for you, who's performed at an exemplary level, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to brag and speak and talk about that person? You wouldn't want to endorse them. You wouldn't want to help them in any way you possibly could. Since you have very little to no potential negative feelings about this person, your potential for creating a litigious or a liable type situation is very, very low to none, and your natural goodwill towards this person is going to kick in. Ultimately, folks who have performed at the highest levels, have impressed their past direct supervisors, these people will be more than willing to speak with future employers or other people about this individual, because they want the very best for that person. So even the excuse that the company policy does not give references is an extreme red flag. And any other reason also, I mean, there's all number of them that come up. So again, the number one thing, if I can only ask one question, one of the most telling questions I could ask is, will your past direct supervisors provide you a reference? And I go through, at the minimum, the last 10 years of work history, if not every single job ever. The second thing that I really highly endorse is using assessment testing, particularly ones that focus on attitude and integrity-related issues. Think about an assessment test as a structured, objective interview. That's exactly what an assessment is. It gives us a format in order to ask a series of 100, 200, 300 interview questions in a structured manner so that there is very little to no bias on that. On how the person both answers and how their answers are interpreted. Plus, we get to compare those answers to a greater population of folks that have been proven to be successful or not successful. Other aspects of assessment testing often cover aptitude, core ability sets, and skills. These can definitely be very helpful as well. So I'd just like to share a personal story about. It was maybe about 8 years ago. I was running a highly sales-based organization. I was essentially a sales and general manager of a company. We sold dishwashing machines, so kind of an odd thing to do. But nonetheless, very formal B2B sales type environment. And I was hiring a new salesperson, outside sales individual, somebody who had pretty strong earning potential. In the low to mid hundreds if they were successful on the role in the role. This individual, for anonymity, I'm gonna call him Joe. He was a younger individual, had some scattered jobs. The work history was a little shaky, but it was impressive. He seemed to have a very high level of achievement. He was extremely charismatic. I mean, this is the type of person that walks in the room and everybody wants to be the friend. Extremely intelligent. This guy's smart as a whip. He had intelligent comebacks for every question, every scenario, well-read, well-educated, and a very, very thorough understanding of the sales process. Might have even had a better one than I did. Could sit here and teach all of us about how to sell effectively. This individual is a stereotypical wolf. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody with this type of profile is necessarily a wolf or a problem generator, but these are the ones that tend to be extremely deceptive. And again, one other thing to point out is this individual had a very, very strong track record of success, at least as how he articulated it and was able to speak to that success in quite a bit of detail, which is one of the things I look for from an interviewing standpoint. But there were a few things that didn't add up. There seemed to be some issues about revolving around how he left organizations. I personally neglected through through his charisma and my awe of this individual to bother to check references, to thoroughly investigate his career history. But I did assess him. I used an assessment test, and he tested off the charts for sales, emotional intelligence, IQ, aptitude for being a salesperson, motivation, energy levels. But he was also off the charts for two core traits that are really problematic: blame, which is personal responsibility, and dishonesty. So that a willingness to do anything to protect himself or get what he wants. And at the time, I looked at this guy and said, this guy's really, really strong, and we're gonna overlook this. We're gonna give it a chance. And right away, right off the bat, we started to have red flags. It might have been even the very first day. He calls in with an excuse. I'm having trouble getting here on time. Shows up 15, 30 minutes late. We have a very structured training process. Right away, starts being very resistant. Why do I need to do this? I want to be out in the field selling. I don't need to spend a week learning about the product. And everything was an argument with him. So anytime direction was given, he didn't feel like maybe that was the right direction. There was always some degree of a fight put up. And these behaviors really began almost at first. Now, I had a slight advantage. I knew that many of these things were going to come up, and I've dealt with people like this before, so I was able to somewhat manage this and make it work, put my foot down, lay down the rules. But nonetheless, it was a very trying situation. Very shortly into his career with us, he began to excel in selling. He was selling more deals, larger deals than the typical new salesperson, higher volume of deals were being produced right off the bat within the first month, and we typically seen more like a 3 to 6 month ramp up period for most sales folks. So, of course, as a sales manager, I've got a million things to do. My numbers are important. I was very happy with this performance. Over time, this person began to integrate into our organization. He began to meddle with other employees' grievances. Become the advocate for these employees to me. So essentially, he's stirring the pot. He continued to demonstrate unreliability. He would call out sick frequently. He would have weird things happen to him on the weekend. I remember an incident where he jumped off a rock and hurt his back. He had habitual issues that go on. Now, are any of these true and these things actually happen? As an employer, really, I can't say. I can just take these things at face value. I can make them go get a doctor's note. But it was consistent. It was very frequent, these types of things that happened. And as our relationship grew, we began to build a rapport, and he began to open up to me from time to time. And I remember very clearly one night I'd taken him out to dinner after having a very successful month. He said, "Hey, Fletcher, I've got something to admit to you. I never finished college, and I put that on my resume." So a lie comes out now. I don't care if you go to college or not. If you're selling, you're successful, then what difference does it make to me? But, it's these little things, they start to come out little by little. Over time, let's skip to our next slide here. Okay, I think that's my last one. Excuse me, all. Over time, what began to happen is some of the people that he was selling to would come back to us and say, this isn't the deal that I signed up for. And because we were a decent-sized organization, we had a channel for dealing with customer issues, and the sales rep didn't necessarily deal with all of them themselves directly. More often than not, actually, somebody on the service side of our organization would, and a manager would get involved to support any sort of service or customer issues. And we started to hear this the first time. It's like, well, maybe it's misunderstanding. Second time, the third time. And sure enough, this individual, had really had been deceitful with his clients to really a point where it became quite problematic. We were having to do a lot of damage control, offer discounts, offer out-of-the-box solutions for these folks in order just to keep them happy. All in all, really became quite a problematic situation. So now we have a top-performing sales individual who's become disruptive in our organization, stirring the pot, highly unreliable, really flat out not honest in lots of different ways. You really couldn't believe almost anything this guy said, and it's starting to affect our client base and those individuals. As we could all imagine, eventually, after maybe about a year and 3 months, this individual quit. Even though he's making excellent money, he's outperforming everybody else, getting a lot of recognitions for his sales performance. And on our end, we had to spend a lot of time confronting his problematic behaviors. So again, time spent, sitting down, having these formal meetings and write-ups, and the toll it took on both us as a management team and our focus away from our core activities, really became quite disruptive. Literally had to threaten to fire this guy multiple times. Just say, hey, Joe, this is it. This is the last straw unless you fix this. And, he'd get better for a while. All in all, really disruptive. And, of course, he quits. And, we're disappointed that we lose, a strong salesperson, but we're all relieved that we get this kind of toxic problem generator out of our organization. So fast forward 3 years, and this was part of the story that makes it really kind of bizarre and funny, but it just highlights the amount of dysfunction in issues a problem generator can have. I'm watching Channel 7 News, 5 o'clock news, the local news, and here comes a guy with a sledgehammer into a business and starts smashing up the place. It's a really, really scary situation. And I'm looking at the TV, and it's Joe. Joe's retaliating against a place that he worked at, and as the news story goes on, he had a dispute with his bosses, the owners of this business, and it escalated to the point, his dysfunctional behaviors escalated to the point that he felt that the appropriate course of action was to go into the place with a sledgehammer and smash the place up. And now he's in jail and created a really volatile, scary situation. So I like to end this story with this punchline. This is how severe and how disruptive a problem generator can be. It's an exaggerated story. It's a true story, but it's an exaggerated story of what can happen, and how we can use a few different types of tools to help prevent this from occurring. So at this point, that's kind of the end of my story, and the end of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? I believe folks can type those in. on the right-hand side of their presentation there, but okay. So you haven't seen any questions come in. So in recap, in order to prevent hiring problem generators who might turn out like my guy Joe, I highly recommend using a very structured and systematic way of collecting and checking references from past direct supervisors. And I highly recommend using assessment tests that are designed to pick up on attitude, behavior, and integrity-related issues with candidates. I appreciate everybody for tuning in today, and wish everybody luck in hiring and being more efficient in the workplace. Thank you.